Design shapes the way you live. I'm Nico, an interior design expert focused on the connection between home and well-being. Using science, design, and professional expertise, I'll help you shape a space that elevates your mindset and enhances your well-being. Let's create space for better living, starting now. You ever walked into your home and felt like you're surrounded by blank walls and empty spaces, unsure where or how to start making it truly yours? I get it. It can feel overwhelming when you know your space has potential, but you just don't know what to do first. In today's episode, we're diving into how to go from living in a blank space to transforming it into something truly special that feels like you. If you've been stuck not knowing where to begin, I'm going to help you take those first steps and start filling your home with the things that reflect who you are and what you need to thrive. Let's get started on turning your space into a place that feels personal, inviting, and most importantly, yours. Okay, so I have a fun little question that I like to ask people sometimes. And I like to ask, if a stranger were to walk around your home without you there, what would they say if I asked them, who do you think lives here? What kind of person lives here? What do they like? Would they be able to really get a glimpse of who you are just from walking through your home? Would they know what you like? If you entertain, if you have any hobbies, if you've ever traveled, if you like your coffee, if you like to read or listen to music, do you think they would be able to get a good sense of who you are from simply looking at your spaces and the things you have in them? So in interior design, ambiance is a big thing. And I'm sure you've heard that term before. The ambiance of a room, the vibe of a room, the feel of a room. And this is something that's often considered at the very start of a project. What ambiance are we trying to create? What's the vibe of this project? And I remember when I was in design school, we had to choose a theme for a room. So the feel of the room, the ambiance. And we could choose between things like minimal and serene, organic and textural, warm and sophisticated. I chose warm and sophisticated. And there was a whole bunch of things that we could choose from. But you're basically choosing a theme at the starting point of the project. This is going to inform and guide the direction and choices. And it has to be considered and obvious throughout the approach to the design and also the execution of the design. So in the end, how that design looks, you should be able to understand what that ambiance is, what the vibe is fairly easily. Alongside this theme, we were also given a blurb about the client, the pretend client. And the blurb gave us important information about who they are, what they like, what their hobbies are, if they have a sense of humor even. Now, if I had just been given that warm and sophisticated parameter without the blurb about who I was designing for, that room would have been fairly generic. The theme would have been seen through textures and colors and shapes and lighting and all of that, but it wouldn't have felt as personalized. Right? And the reason is a room really needs that connection to an individual, to have presence, to have ambiance, right? That vibe, in order for it to feel connected and special to the people that live there. And the way you do this is by telling a story. The story can be told with everything placed in the space. And that story has to come from the people or the person that lives there. You. So if you ask that stranger to tell you about who lives in your home, what would they say? Would they actually be able to describe you? Now, I'm assuming if you're listening to this episode, your space is probably blank. You don't have a story in your interiors right now. If that stranger were to walk through your home, they may not be able to speak to who lives there. They may not just be able to describe you and say what you're interested in. Maybe they'll say, okay, you know what? I know they like coffee because I can see on their counter they have a coffee pot. But aside from that, maybe your art is fairly generic and you don't totally love it. There's no connection to it. Maybe you're just not even sure with the colors. You might not even have any colors in your space right now. Everything from decorative objects, it could be very generic and things that you've purchased on a whim and you're really not sure if you even like them or how to arrange them or or, there's no story, there's no soul to your space. So at the end of this episode, I'm going to share some easy ways to add personality to your space and how to start when you have endless options in front of you at all times. I'll also share how to start a plan so that you can stay on task when you're shopping. Believe it or not, when I was sourcing for clients, I often needed that project roadmap, something to really keep me on task. The more experience you get, you can kind of stay on task. You can, that vision is in your head of what the project needs. So you don't necessarily need that roadmap as much. But when I first started out, if I went out sourcing without a clear understanding of what the project needed and what the client, what we were creating, I would get lost and confused. Designers will literally make endless design decisions in a really short period of time. I remember hopping from tile showrooms to carpet showrooms to fabric to appliances all in the same day. And, if you don't have a roadmap, a really clear understanding of the project deliverables, then it is really easy to get lost in all of the options. So that might be you. Right? When you go to a store, there's endless things to look at. And if you're shopping online, it's the same. It's so easy to get sidetracked and lost going down a path that you're like, I don't even know how I got here. And then you end up just feeling discouraged and you're not even sure if you can make the calls. So if you listened to last week's episode, I talked about when things aren't working in your space and when there's clashing elements and you're not sure where to start in terms of, removing things and getting your space to feel really cohesive. So, but this week it's kind of the opposite, right? Last week is when there's too much going on in the room. And this week it's when there's not enough, right? It's all about how to inject some style and that personality to a room that has none. So I've been in homes over the years and I've met with many clients that have, when I speak to them, they have a ton of personality. They have great stories. They've traveled. They either have really interesting hobbies or they've had different hobbies over the years. They have family. Maybe they love to cook. They have a great sense of humor. And I've rarely talked to somebody who doesn't have something that they love or have loved or used to do or would like to do, right? Everyone has a story, yet it's amazing how many times I've come across people over the years where their homes are void of anything that speaks to these things. And it's always surprising because as I'm talking to them, I'm like, wow, this person is really interesting. Or wow, they always wanted to travel to this particular place. Just through conversation. Honestly, they might not have, a huge travel log, but they're just a really nice person. They're really a good person and they enjoy meeting with friends or they enjoy having their family over for dinner. So there are so many opportunities in our lives to showcase what we're about, even if the things that we're about aren't these grandioso things, right? We can show who we are in our homes in subtle ways, right? We can create vibes and ambiances that play to who we are personally. I remember talking to this one man several years ago. We were having a conversation about the importance of displaying and connecting to the objects in your spaces and how being around art and seeing art is an amazing way to boost your happiness and make your home look really great. And I was sharing with him some of the stats on art and the importance of either engaging in art or viewing art and surrounding your home with art that you connect with and then spending time actually engaging with it, right? Just looking at it and appreciating it. And he was looking at me as I was explaining all of this with this look on his face, like he was really having a moment and he was thinking really deeply about what we were talking about. And at the end of the conversation, he said, it's so funny that you say that. He's like, I'm an artist. I paint. And I moved into my house years ago and I just haven't hung any of my paintings on the walls. And he went on to say how they're all in storage. He's got them in a closet. They're all tucked away. And he just doesn't have anything in his home that shows his personality and that he loves. And then he kind of questioned, I wonder how my kids feel when they come to my house. And I sort of gauged that he had obviously gone through something, maybe a divorce or something where he had left the family home and he was now trying to recreate a home for him and his kids. And at the end of our conversation, I just kind of encouraged him. I'm like, okay, you need to go home, get those paintings out of storage and hang them on your walls and just see how much that impacts your enjoyment of your space and your kids' feelings of home. So going back to the beginning of my career, I was a junior designer. I was probably only a year in at that time. And I was just trying to build my experience. And I was working on designing and staging for show suites. So show suites are basically new builds, condos and townhomes. They'll create a show suite that people can come through and do their pre-sales. And one of the interesting things, when you design and stage a show suite, you get some info on the target demographic, right? So what they are selling, who they're selling to, who they're trying to appeal to. And that really drives pretty much all of the decisions. So for instance, if they're trying to sell to a young professional, like a group of young professionals are the target demographic, the designers aren't going to put bunk beds and a toy storage bin in the second bedroom. So I might look at creating an office instead of a second bedroom. If they're young professionals, they can see that office and they can envision themselves working in that office space. Even when you set the table, right? You're staging the entire thing to look like somebody's living there. So if you're putting place settings out, how many are you putting out? Is there wine glasses? Is there every little thing is considered. What the art looks like on the walls has to appeal to whatever the demographic is. If it's a young families, you're going to choose a certain style of art or colors. Whereas if it's young professionals, you're going to look to something else. But even though it's fairly pared down, right? So everything that you put in the show suite isn't overly done. It's fairly understated. It's not too much of anything. It's not going to be too overly personalized. It's done just enough for whoever's walking through to really be able to picture their life there. They don't have to use their imagination to envision it. So they walk in and there's that beautiful office where they can sit and work to sell the experience of living in that home. That's what they're doing. And the same goes for when someone is selling a home, right? Their realtor is going to tell them if they have really personalized spaces that they need to remove the family photos. They need to remove anything that really speaks to their clients' personal lives. And this is for the same reason, so that someone walking in will be able to picture themselves in the home and that it will start to appeal to how they envision their life in this new home or this new chapter. They want to create that connection to the home, right? So realtors will always say, let's depersonalize. So, show homes and homes for sale are really void of overly personalized spaces. There's just a nod to how someone would live there. And the goal is to make it look beautiful, make it look appealing. I personally think that when you have personalized items in a home, it feels like you're in someone else's home. It doesn't feel like you're in your home. And that's the goal, is you want somebody to walk in and feel like they're walking into a home that might be theirs. Now, if there's a picture of grandma and grandpa on the wall, that's telling someone else's story. And then they're going to naturally start focusing on the story of the people that live there instead of the story that they could have by living there, right? Imagine moving into a show home. Imagine not having a connection with any objects that you live with, right? There's no personalization of anything, right? There's nothing that speaks to you. There hasn't been any real input into what you live with. I imagine it would be like moving into a hotel room. And maybe this is how you live. Maybe you're sitting there right now looking around your room and there's really nothing that's personalized. There's nothing that really speaks to who you are. Now, I remember reading this article that Oprah put out, and she spoke about living in a hotel room for an extended period of time. And I believe this was sort of her start to thinking about minimalism. Now, I don't know if she is still, trying to live a more minimalistic life, but this was a start of her really kind of thinking about the idea of minimalism. and only really having what you need and not a whole lot more. And she made a comment about how she had only had a few of her current books that she was reading and that she loved that. Now, I think my take is we could all use this from time to time, right? We could all use a space that was void of extra, of the things, of clutter, of belongings, of excess that often gets accumulated and starts to fill up our spaces. And why is that? Why do we crave and long for simplicity? Right? I mean, if your life is hectic, let's say, and you don't have a space that helps you take a break from that and rest and recharge and refuel, that isn't a mental burden, right? Because spaces can become mental burden. So if your life is hectic and you don't have a space that allows you to do that, we absolutely need a break from busyness. Right? So if we have a lot of stuff going on emotionally in our lives, our emotional state requires a certain simplicity at times, and it calls for a certain aesthetic and a certain interior experience that's going to help balance those emotions, not add to it. Right? I mean, we've all done it. The stress clean, the stress declutter, right? I mean, I've talked to so many people who, when they're feeling like their life is a bit crazy, it's chaotic, there's just stuff going on, they want to clean. They start to clean. They want to reorganize. They want to purge. They just get the urge to get rid of their things. But what if you lived in that state where you don't let things come in to your home? Or you don't have the things that you have selected and thought about that you personally connect with. You haven't created a home that really supports you and speaks to your life. It speaks your life back to you, right? Our homes are essentially a mirror of who we are and who we want to be. So how many hours do you think we spend in our homes? I recently read that we spend about 60% of our waking hours at home. And I think that that's probably on the low side, but that's kind of the average. And it's really common, even more so than it ever used to be, for people to stay in their homes. They don't leave their home in the day. They're home literally all day. Now, I know personally how important it is to be around your stuff. My family belongings were in storage for 10 months. Several years ago. You may have heard me tell this story, but we literally lived out of suitcases. Yes, we could unpack, but the only things we had were our immediate possessions, our clothing. We had books. We had, toys for the kids, but not all of their toys. Most of their things were in boxes in storage. We were in between places, and it was hard, you guys. It was really, really hard. And I didn't realize at the time how challenging it was, how sort of emotionally challenging that was to not be able to carve out our home, to create a home and to really personalize my surroundings. Coming back to what Oprah experienced in the hotel room, the idea that we could all benefit from a little less visual clutter, less mental noise, essentially minimalism. Because if you're listening to this episode, you're probably living in that blank slate, in that empty room. And I need you to know that you don't have to fear filling it. You don't have to be weary of layering in your life. Belongings don't have to be clutter. And I want to make that distinction because I think there's people out there that promote minimalism and they show it to be this amazing thing. And yes, there are for sure benefits. It's easier to keep clean. You only have what you need. You save money and time, right? But you don't have to go that to experience minimalism. You don't have to go to the extreme of minimalism where you look around and there's nothing that you connect with, right? And what we know, our meaning of home and how much we are impacted by the spaces we live, and carving them out and personalizing them is a very, very crucial thing for our mental health. It's important you don't miss the benefits that your home can provide when you use it as a tool for better living. Because maybe you're tied to the idea of what minimalism could do for you personally. Now, you might be someone who doesn't necessarily want to live in a minimalistic space. It's just the way it is because of circumstances, right? Like the painter I mentioned. You may just need to create a roadmap and some blinders to help you stay focused when you're starting, because you just feel overwhelmed on how to start adding personality and things into your space. So let's talk about what to do if you live in that blank space. And I'm talking to the minimalists and the others of you who are kind of just overwhelmed on where to start. And just to mention that you don't have to overly commit to a style or a look, right? It can be simplistic, but characteristic. You can still add character without it being overwhelming, okay? And I want to make that clear. What happens if you decide that you don't want to live in emptiness anymore, but you fear where to begin, right? It can be a scary step, but the beauty of having a blank slate is it's really about adding, okay? And you can do this slowly. You can add a few things and then live with it for a bit and then add some more. You can find that piece that you love that has a story and save for it. Right? You don't have to do this. You can layer in things slowly. And I think that might be an important thing to know for those of you who have been living in a blank slate for a while, where once you start adding, it's going to feel like your space is changing. And that might feel a little uncomfortable at first, depending where you are emotionally, what you really have wanted for your space, or just your level of confidence. If you're just lacking in confidence, it might be a hard step. But so just take care in knowing that it is an awesome place to be when you can just start adding and layering things in slowly. You know, you can start with an area rug. Live with that for a little bit. Then think about adding some toss cushions or a piece of art. You know, like just start layering those things in. Okay, so now let's get into the tips, the things that you can do to really create that roadmap and start layering in those pieces and really personalize your spaces. So the first one is define how you want your space to feel. Okay, back to the whole ambiance and the vibe. How do you want your space to feel? When you walk in, when you use that room, how do you need it to feel? And this is going to inform all of your choices and serve as a guide to keep your choices intentional and aligned with your lifestyle. Now, something to consider when you're thinking about how you want the room to feel is you really need to understand and define how you want the room to be used. And if there's anything in the room that's key for your lifestyle. So if you want to be more of an avid reader, you're going to make choices that keep you in line with what you want to use the room for. Or is there anything that you need to keep out of the room? Say you've got work things that are overlapping right now, so you want to get that out of the room to keep your room a space that helps you calm down and relax, especially if you do live, sort of a busy life, or you're feeling hectic and you're kind of emotionally spent, right? So you need to think about how you're going to use the room, and that's also going to inform the feeling that the room needs to be. Okay. The next thing is to start with one meaningful piece. Okay. Use one piece that you can build the space around, right? So let this piece inspire colors and textures, materials for the rest of the room. So if the piece that you find, let's say it's a very textural ceramic, oversized vase, what's the color of that? What's the textures of that? Is it more organic feeling? Is it, is the shape of it curved? All of these things can inform the other choices that you make. But most importantly, that piece, that personal item needs to tell your story, right? So is it a travel memento? Is it something that was handmade that you bought in the town that you live or a town that you traveled to? And if you don't have that piece right now, is it something that you can purchase online? If you've traveled to, say, Portugal or something, can you look and find something that you can purchase online and have shipped to you that's incredibly special and that's going to really add that personalized piece to the space? You might have a family heirloom, a piece of art that you love, and even with art, you can be inspired by a place that you've been and find something online that looks a little bit like it. It doesn't have to be this painting is of that place that you've been. It can be this painting looks a lot like that place that I've been. Okay, so start with that one meaningful piece to really get that room going. And the next thing, number 3, is to layer in texture for depth, right? A minimalistic space doesn't have to feel empty. If you enjoy having a bit more of a minimalistic space, it doesn't have to feel flat. It doesn't have to feel empty and void of personality. So layering in things like natural materials and fabrics and finishes that add that warmth and personality. You can do this with all sorts of things, right? Back to the ceramic or, linen and wood. All of these things add that interest and texture and depth to the room. So really think about that. And again, back to my second point is just to tell that story and to be choosing things intentionally that have a little bit of that story, texture, and layering. So number 4 is to incorporate your interests and your passions, right? This is really important when you're starting to show your personality in your space. And I will say, make sure you show everyone's interests and passions in a room. I think that it's such an important thing to involve others in the conversation, because often it's one person, it's sort of the home lead that really dictates the things that go into this space. And when spaces are personalized for a family, let's say, if you bring in other people's interests into the space, just a little nod of something that they might like as well, it really creates this blended aesthetic. And it tells the story of not just one person, but everybody that uses that home. So things like books and music, photography, nature, these are all things that you can integrate into your space. And of course, like if you've got kids, I don't know if you're going to say, well, hey, let's put up some art on the wall that's, I don't know, Peppa Pig or something. That might be taking it a little too far. But yeah, if you've got teenagers or whatever, this is a great opportunity to say, let's create this space that doesn't just speak to one person, but speaks to the family as a whole. Instead of using generic decor, use your passions as design elements, right? So you can stack those beautiful books on topics that you love, display musical instruments, or showcase personal photos in a really curated kind of way. Okay, and number 5 is think about your color palette and how to create a cohesive color palette. Color really creates atmosphere, and even a neutral space really can benefit from an intentional color palette that makes it feel purposeful rather than empty. So in order for something to feel purposeful is when you're playing with more than one tone, right? If you've got just one color throughout the space, it's not going to feel very cohesive. It's not going to feel purposeful and intentional. So playing with tones, right? So using a base color, an accent color that works really well with that base color, and then a contrast color to add some interest. Okay. And this doesn't have to be done in a really bold way. It can be done in very subtle ways, but the key is that it feels cohesive. It feels intentional. Those undertones are working well together. The color palette is just really, cohesive. Okay. So always keep that in mind, and then start bringing that into your textiles as well, because we can create these colors with paint on the walls, but then when we start layering in this color palette into all of the other choices in the room, that's when it really starts to feel intentional and it blends nicely and there's good flow and all of that, right? So yes, create a cohesive color palette. So number 6 is to make thoughtful purchases. So make sure every time you are making a purchase, you know that it's the right purchase, okay? You've got your plan, you've got your roadmap, you know what you're going to use the room for, you know how that room is, you want it to make you feel, and you're able to really weigh the purchase and decide whether it's a good purchase for you. Impulse shopping is never a good thing unless you really, really know what you're doing. Okay. Cause you can have an impulse shop if you have a plan, right? You can by chance come across something that you absolutely love and you buy it in the moment because you know that it stays with the plan. It's creating that ambiance. It's telling that story. You absolutely love it. It's money well spent, all of those things. But there's also go impulse shopping where it actually takes you down a different path. Okay. And you start moving in the wrong direction, and then you kind of like regret that purchase, or it's not the right thing for your space. So just be cautious of that. And a couple things that you can do, a few little tips in this is just make sure that the piece aligns with your vision, and ask yourself, am I going to love this piece in a year from now? Because you don't want to make a purchase on impulse and then regret it, right? That's a waste of money, and we just don't want to do that. So will I love this piece from a year from now? And does this piece help to tell my story? Is it really going to add to that ambiance and really personalize my space? Okay, if you absolutely love it, chances are you're going to display it differently, you're going to speak about it differently, and you're going to appreciate it in the room differently. So that's something to consider. So number 7 is blend different styles for harmony. When I say harmony, I mean harmony with other people in the home, okay? If you share a home with someone else, merging styles is okay. Okay, because you might be in a home where you have two people that want a different aesthetic, okay? And you might agree on the use of the room, but if it comes down to picking and choosing the items in the room, you might disagree. So you're going to have to merge some styles. You're going to have to give and take. But the most important thing, and something I really want to stress, is to include other people, right? To have the conversation. And if you have different aesthetics, you can't agree on the aesthetic, then just find like a common thread, a common theme. So for instance, if you both love travel, right? Or you've lived in another country for a time, and there were certain things about your travels or that country that you both can agree that you loved. You know, let's say you both love nature or good craftsmanship. So if you focus on what you both love, you can make selections with this in mind versus the style. So it's like one person really likes modern, one person might really love traditional. Throw that out the window. You both love good craftsmanship. You both love how well things are made. Find things that have a story about craftsmanship. And then chances are you're both going to be able to get on board with it because you're just lost in the story and you love how it was made and you love the process of how it was put together. So that really helps. And again, just understand that there will be a give and take. And when you're creating a space for more than one person, you will have to blend styles for harmony, okay? The last tip for today is how you can stay focused and avoid that overwhelm. So the first thing is to create a mood board. Use Pinterest or a physical board to collect visuals that inspire you and reference it all the time. You want to remind yourself of what you're trying to create. Whether you're shopping, bring a digital copy or a physical printed copy with you. When you're searching online, have it next to you. Reference it always. Get super familiar with it and feel good about it. This is your roadmap, right? And start small. You don't have to go crazy. You can start with just like one bookshelf or a corner of the room or even your coffee table. Just start personalizing something first and trust your instincts. When you're stay focused and avoid overwhelm, you really do need to trust your instincts. If something really speaks to you, chances are there's a reason. So let your space be an extension of who you are. All right. Well, I think I'm going to move into the key takeaways from the episode, and I'm going to run through these quickly because it's a bit of a longer episode today. So key takeaways from today. Your home is a reflection of you. Okay, so if a stranger walked through your home, would they get a sense of who you are, what you love, and how you live? Ambiance starts with intention. Interior designers begin projects with a theme and a vision. Your home should have a guiding style and a personal touch. Personalization brings soul to a space. So adding objects that tell your story makes a home feel meaningful. And you can add the objects with souvenirs, books, even things like hobbies. So personalizing brings soul to your space. A blank space isn't always better. While minimalism can offer clarity, a home devoid of personality can feel empty. You don't have to fear layering in your life. And the last takeaway from today is avoid decision fatigue. Having a roadmap before shopping helps you make intentional choices and stay focused on your home's overall vision. So have that mood board. Thank you for listening to today's episode.
Thanks so much for listening today. If you found this episode helpful, the best way to support the show is to follow along and share it with someone who'd love it too. And if you'd like to go a step further, you can become one of our Better Living backers. It's a small monthly contribution that helps keep the show going. And as a thank you, I'll send you a personal note along with a 15% discount for the Create Space course when it launches. You can find the support the show link right in the show notes. I'm so glad you're here. Thanks for creating space with me.